Today everyone, we're going to be making some clarified butter, and we're going to be doing it in our new kitchen as well. Now, what is clarified butter? Clarified butter is literally the process of separating all the water, the milk solids, and the fat in butter until we have a pure form of fat. So basically we're able to keep it longer and it won't go rancid. It also has a higher smoking point. Now, the smoking point of normal butter is actually quite low. And if you notice that when you cook with butter, normally it turns brown in the pan, which you'll get like beurre noisette or beurre noir, which is black butter. This can be for a reason if you want to get it. Sometimes it's not always for a reason. Sometimes it's, because you accidentally burn it. Once you actually clarify it, it will raise the smoking point to about 480 Fahrenheit or about 250 Celsius. There are a lot of benefits to doing this at home. Now, butter has a composition of around 80% fat and about 15 or more percent, 16, 17% water. The difference between the EU and the US is that in America, the butter content, or the fat content, I should say, tends to be a little lower than in Europe, but that's not always the case because the butter that we're using today has about 82 grams of fat per 100 grams. So sometimes it'll be a little higher in Europe, sometimes not. One main reason of clarifying your butter though is not only to help with the increase in smoking point, which can help a lot, especially when you're cooking at higher temperatures, but is also to preserve it longer so it can stay in the fridge longer so it doesn't go rancid. Oxidation is what happens when the fat molecules are exposed to oxygen, and this process of oxidation will then break down the fat molecules into smaller compounds, which are very unpleasant. This is one method of it turning rancid. Then you have hydrolysis, which is the process of the water breaking down the fats into fatty acids. And it can also be accelerated again when it's exposed to air, light, heat, or just being left outside of the fridge. And I'm gonna actually show you two methods. One method is more of the traditional method that we all learn in the kitchen. It's very common to use, it's easy as well. The other one is a little bit of a cheat. So everyone, before we get going, if you want to cook along with me, get your butter out, get a couple pans, and let's get started. So first you're gonna need a small stock pot, or you can use a larger pot as well. It actually be a faster process if you use a much wider pot than a tall one, because the cooking surface will be a lot wider. We're going to be using about 1 kilo, so that's 2.2 pounds. Now this is a moment where you want to keep an eye on the butter. You don't want to burn it, especially if you're using gas, because with induction, I can just set this on the setting and forget about it. With gas, it keeps heating up more and more and more and more, and it's easy to forget. Then again, it's easy to burn up with induction as well too. Now we're going to put this on the induction. Once it melts, we're going to bring it up to a light simmer. Once it comes up to a simmer, you're going to drop the temperature on low and let it cook. It's going to go through a few different stages. You're going to notice the milk solids and the protein starting to rise to the top. You're also going to notice that the water is going to start evaporating. We want to get rid of the water. Once the milk solids start to crackle, start to break, this is a good sign. We want to continue this until they're like really broken, until they start breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces. If you still notice that there's a decent amount of water that's evaporating off of the top of the butter here, then you can crank it up a little hotter to get rid of it a little faster. Just be careful not to burn the butter, because all the proteins and everything are like sticking to the bottom of the pan, and anything that's not sticking is floating to the top. But once the butter is starting to look a little clear, you can like see straight down to the bottom like we can here. Beautiful. This is what you want. Turn it off the heat, let it cool down, and once it's cool, we'll start to separate the milk solids from the fat. And whatever you do, don't scrape the bottom. This is a no-no. Now, while you're doing this, just keep in mind that this is a little dangerous because we're dealing with super hot fat. And while you're doing it, it may be a good idea to wear something like long sleeve or anything like what I have with my chef coat here, just so you don't burn yourself, because it can spit. So if you're wearing flip-flops and shorts right now, you may want to switch. Now that we're waiting for this to cool down, I'm going to take a little container. You can get a measuring cup or whatever you need, a glass bowl, anything. I'm going to take a little strainer, and I'm going to take some cheesecloth or muslin cloth. This is something that we use a lot in the kitchen. If you can't find it at the grocery store, more likely not, you can get it online, or you can get it at any like restaurant supply store. It's very, very handy. Now at this moment we have a few options. We could take a ladle and collect all the little milk solids that are on top if you want, or we can just pass it through the cheesecloth and just be done with it instead of having to wash more dishes. And that's what we're gonna do. Now, very carefully, I would actually recommend doing this over the sink. You're going to pour this through the cheesecloth. The more butter you clarify at once, the longer it's going to take. And again, depending on the size pot that you're going to be using, a taller pot's going to take a little longer than a pot with a wider base. Now, if you wanted to turn this into ghee, it's a much longer process because we want to actually brown the butter. You can keep the clarified butter up to a few months in the fridge. It's a good idea to separate it into smaller containers before you put it in the fridge, because it will solidify on you. Now for the second method, you're gonna be needing a pot of water. You're gonna be needing some sort of little pastry bag or a Ziploc bag and a little bit of butter. We're only gonna be doing about 250 grams because the bag's not that big. And since I don't have anything to tie this, I'm just gonna be making a little knot. Something more or less like this. It'll look nicer at the end. Now, this is more of Thomas Keller's method. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring the water up to a light simmer. I'm going to take some clothes pegs and make sure that it doesn't touch the bottom. You don't want to melt the bag. This is not the idea. Yeah? You just want to submerge it as much as you can. If there's a little air pocket, as I have, it's okay. We're going to melt the butter inside. Once it's fully melted, we're going to take it out and we're going to either one, put this into an ice bath and chill it quickly, or you're going to put it in the fridge. And since I'm using a pastry bag, I'm going to try to hang it upright so there's the point, the bottom piece, is going to be facing down. Now, if you're wondering on what type of butter should you use, I personally prefer unsalted butter, and a lot of other chefs do as well. Why? Because you can control the amount of salt that you add to the dish. It's a lot easier instead of already having some fat that you add to the dish that's already salted. Because if you need to add more fat, you're going to be adding more salt. And if you don't want it more salty or saltier, then, you know, it's one of those things. Now, keep in mind, even unsalted butter does have trace amounts of salts in it. There's a difference between having a little bit and then having salt added to it. Now, once the butter solidifies in the fridge, you can tell that the water and the milk proteins that are, or the milk solids that are on the bottom here have separated with the butter fat. It's not gonna be perfect, but they are split. Now we're just gonna snip the bottom of this bag. We're gonna drain off the milk and the milk solids will be left. Now that I've shown you both methods, they both have their pros and cons. The traditional method is probably the best method if you want a very nice, clear, like clarified butter. It takes a little bit of time to actually keep an eye on it and to cook it, but in the end, you get liquid gold. It's beautiful. The other method is a little bit of a cheat. However, you have to spend a decent amount of time waiting for it to cool down and to solidify in the fridge or in an ice bath. And you don't get like a completely pure form of clarified butter unless you try to clean it off or wash it off or any of the other milk solids and everything else. So it's not as clean as the one that we made earlier. Let me know, everyone, down in the comments which method you prefer or if you've tried either of them, and hopefully it turns out successful for you as well. And I hope I made the video easy enough for you guys to follow step by step. And if you have any questions or comments, then let me know down below. Don't forget to hit that like button and the subscribe button as well if you do happen to enjoy this video on my channel, as it helps the channel out greatly, it helps the video out greatly, and if you share the video with more people, it helps it out even more. Be sure to watch the next video coming up here, and I will see you guys again very soon. Until next time, take care.